Hey guys, thank you for joining me here at Complete in Christ. As today I want to start a new series with you from the book of Joshua, Joshua chapter 24. You know, there's a statement that Joshua makes in chapter 24, verse 15, at the end of that verse, where he says, very familiar statement, it says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." So I want us to just take a look at the context of this and take a look at this passage and exactly what Joshua says, the challenge that he issues to his people. You know, and I really do think that what he was telling them, one of the main things is that, man, guys, you got to decide that it is time for you to decide. Are you really going to follow the one true God? Or are you going to continue to go back to false gods? And I really believe that we're at a point to where we need to understand the importance of our decision to follow Jesus, to love Jesus, to follow the Lord, to serve the Lord, to fear the Lord, and to worship the Lord. You know, it's time for us to really, really decide what we're going to do. You know, when you look at this passage, and today I'm going to read you verses 14 and 15, but what you find here is that this is Joshua's farewell address to Israel. He knew that his death was approaching, and he wanted to challenge, to exhort, and encourage the people one more time. You see, Joshua was a chosen leader of God's people. He understood the importance of choosing to live in total dependence upon the Lord. Why? Because that's the way Joshua lived. You see, when God spoke, Joshua obeyed. When God gave direction, Joshua followed. Joshua lived his life in total dependence upon the Lord. I can remember several years ago walking through a study of the life of Joshua with a friend of mine. And one of the things that I learned in that study was this, that when God spoke, Joshua did what God asked of him. You know, that's a pretty good testimony. Is that the testimony of my life? Is that the testimony of your life? Have we really made the decision? Have we really made the choice that as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord? And I'm going to lead in that by the choices that I make and the direction that I lead my family. It's time for us to really, really decide. You see, Joshua had seen God do some amazing things. You know, he had seen God deliver. He had seen God radically change people. He had seen the faithfulness of God. He had seen God honor his promises. And what Joshua wanted for the people was what God wanted for the people. Joshua understood what God wanted for the people of Israel. And that's exactly what Joshua wanted for him. His heart was to live in dependence upon the Lord, and he wanted the people that he was leading to live in dependence upon the Lord. And see, that's the challenge from this passage. That's what Joshua was challenging the people with one last time, is that you need to decide what you're going to do. Let's look at Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15, and focus in today just on one phrase. Verse 14 says this. It says, "Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth." Then he says this, "Put away the gods, little g, which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord." He goes on in verse 15 and he says this, "If it's disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourself today whom you will serve, whether the gods, little g, which your fathers served beyond the river, or the god, little g, of the Amorites in whose land you were living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." You see, Joshua simply issues a challenge to the people. And he says, look, you got to decide. I have decided, Joshua says, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. What about you? And it's time for you to decide, was the challenge to the people as he approached the end of his life. Today, I want to look at the first little phrase. It says, the first thing he says is, you need to fear the Lord. That you need to fear the Lord. What does that mean? What does that begin to look like if I truly fear the Lord? The word fear here basically means three things. The first thing is to respect. It's showing respect because you understand the worth of the one or the object in whom you're showing respect to. It's a deep, deep adoration that leads to respect that leads to deep respect because of one's ability or worth. The second thing is to reverence. You have this profound reverence or respect. And listen to this. This really spoke to me. That leads to honor and obedience. Let me say that again. To reverence, to have this deep respect that leads to something. It leads to honoring the one in which you respect and reverence, and to obeying, to doing what they say. And the third thing it means is to stand in awe. It's this overwhelming sense of awe, of adoration, of respect and reverence because of the magnitude of the one in which you stand in awe of. You begin to realize the one you stand in awe of is extremely powerful. He's extremely grand. As a matter of fact, it's really hard to describe the one you stand in awe of because he is so grand, he's so big that it's hard to describe him. So we see that when Joshua says you need to fear the Lord, you need to respect him because of his abilities, because of who he is. You need to show reverence that leads to obedience. And you need to stand in awe because of his power. You know, as I thought about that, I couldn't help but think about Proverbs 1, verse 7. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. You see, for me to stand in respect and reverence and awe of the Lord is the beginning of my understanding. It's the beginning of my knowledge. And that verse goes on and says that a fool despises wisdom and instruction. You know, what that says to me is this, is that it is absolutely foolish for me not to live my life in fear of the Lord, in a reverent fear of God because of who he is. And then he uses the word Lord here, that you need to fear the Lord. The word Lord is the word that was translated the word Yahweh. The word Lord is translated from Yahweh. And when you think about Yahweh, and you go back to the Hebrew language, what you begin to understand is this, that was a word that they seldom even spoke it. Why? Because they stood in awe and had such respect of God that they felt like his name was too sacred even to speak. So he says, look, you trust in, you fear this God who is holy, who is righteous, who is really indescribable, that he is so big, he is so massive, he is so powerful that you stand in awe of him. You know, God kind of described himself like this when was asked, who do I say that you are? He says, that I am who I am. That's kind of what the word Yahweh refers to, that he is the God who he says that he is. You see, he's holy, he's righteous. He's far beyond our comprehension fully. He's indescribable. He's, in our language, we probably don't have a word that really gives us a really good description of who God really, really is. I'm reminded of A.W. Tozer when he said that oftentimes what we've tried to do in having a better understanding of God or trying to describe God is that we've tried to define the divine in human terms, which is impossible to do. And what we've done is we've made him lesser than who he is so we can have a better understanding of him. You see, he is who he says he is. And as I think about fearing the Lord, being respectful, respecting him because of his worth, having reverence that leads to honor and obedience, standing in awe of him because of his grandeur, do you think that maybe in our culture that we don't have a real good understanding of who God really is? You know, it seems that maybe we've lost this fear of the Lord. And could it be because we really don't understand who he is, what he has done, and what he can do? Or could it be that we've tried to make him into this God that we understand, and we've done that to the point that we've made him into the God that we want him to be instead of the God that he says that he is? And can I tell you that that's a great concern of mine, that we have made God into who we want him to be instead of who he really is, and we've lost our reverent respect of simply living life standing in awe of who God is. You know, the first thing that Joshua says to them in verses 14 and 15, as we reach this part to where he says, look, I have decided that for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And I'm challenging you to do the same thing. He says where we need to start is a reverent fear of Yahweh. A reverent, holy respect of standing in awe of the God that is who he says he is. He says, I am who I say that I am. And we need to stand in reverent awe with deep respect and adoration for who he is. May we start today living with deep respect and reverence of our God. May we simply fear the Lord. I hope you have a blessed day. Let Jesus be Jesus in you today. Thank you so much for watching Complete in Christ as we strive to teach you about the Christ life. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and may you have a blessed day walking with Jesus.